get started because that's why we're here. Now, one of the first things on our kind of agenda for tonight is working with denim, but specifically with jeans. You know, when jeans outlive their usability because of whatever, the children have grown too much, they don't fit any longer, or the children have moved out and they left you their entire collection along with other things. So you have a lot of jeans around the house and you just can't part with them. Well, there's another whole life for them. So that's kind of the basis of the quilt. The other part is we need to add something to it to make it interesting. And the other part could be clothing that you have around the house, could be dresses, shirts, whatever. So consider this like a textile pizza. Okay, so I'm gonna disappear. You're not gonna see my face probably until the end, about another 40 or 45 minutes, but we'll be focusing on the table. So with that, John is going to move the camera and let's hope and see. Okay, a little bit more. That's perfect. Great. I'm going to hold it up a little bit. So there is a quilt that's made out of jeans, and the centers, there's kind of denim around all those pretty fabrics. The back is just denim. And, you know, jeans come in different colors. So I kind of had to work out something. So on the back, it also looks pretty. Now the individual sections on here, and I'll just bring it a little closer to the camera. That's okay, that's okay. Are circles. And in the middle of the circle is your pretty fabric. So I'm gonna set this aside and let's go and see how we're gonna make those pretty circles with the fabric in the middle. It's a lot of work, and I also like to take advantage of the things that are available to us. So you can do this by sewing the entire thing. By the time you've made 4 of those squares, you go, my gosh, what did I get myself into? So we're going to take a slightly easier step. We're going to use something called fusible. So you apply this to the fabric and it becomes sticky. So it will stick to whatever you put it adjacent to. The sticky stuff, for those that are not familiar with it, so if I'm giving too much detail, that's why. The sticky stuff, one of them comes by the brand name Steam-A-Seam. The other one is Heat and Bond, and there's a variety of other ones, but I'm mentioning these two specifically now because they're easier to work with. And both of those, Steam-A-Seam and Heat and Bond, come as a Steam-A-Seam or Heat and Bond Permanent and Steam-A-Seam or Heat and Bond Light. Permanent means there is no sewing required. So it will fuse, you iron it so it's really sticking to whatever it is that you want to, and it will stay there. Sewing is possible, but generally what happens, the needle gets gummed up. So I wouldn't recommend it. If you do want to have a sticky that you sew through, that's when you go through a light. So a Steam-A-Seam Light or a Heat and Bond Light. So this is my Steam-A-Seam section. On one side you can write on. It also has a grid, which you can probably not see very well because it's yellow on white. So we're going to keep that part, but I'm going to peel the underside. And I think it's time for me to put my glasses on. Oh, there. Peel that off. Now this part, can you hear it? It's going. Okay, that's the sticky part. We're going to put the sticky to the wrong side of the fabric. Now you notice that's a leg of a pair of jeans. Which side do we want to make pretty? I want the pretty side to be the wrong side because it's a brighter color. So I'm going to put this on this side, which I'm considering this to be the wrong side. I can now trace on here the circles that we need for the quilt to be made out of denim. And don't get frightened here. To draw circles, whatever you have that's round around the house, it's fine. Plate. A dinner plate is a little bit too big, but I would say a dessert plate, or if you still have china, you know, the saucer that goes under a cup, perfect size. So we're going to draw these on the paper side of the Steam-A-Seam. So there's one circle, another circle. And we can fit one more in here. Do you think this was pre-planned? Okay, so now I would go and cut these circles out. Now, in the interest of time, this is like just on TV, you know, the cake goes in the oven and then it comes out because there's a time lapse. There's no time lapse here, but here are some circles that have been cut out. Okay. And so there is the paper that we drew on. We take this off. Now this fabric is sticky. What we need to do here is to put the pretty fabric on top there. Can you see that? Okay, but being a quilt, I would like to put a square of batting underneath as well. Glasses on. So here it goes. And we put that on there. Give that a tap, and that has stepped down, but not permanently enough. Okay, now we're going to take one of these edges and fold over. And we're going to take our time because it has to be precise. So that's one folded over and it's stuck down enough for now. We're going to fold now the other side. That's pretty good. And one more side. And finally, the fourth side. So there is one square for your quilt done. I'll take this to the ironing board and I'll probably disappear for just a sec because I want to iron this. Give it a good press. Now steam a seam and heat and bond need to be heated and pressed for about 20 seconds. If it's less than that, the glue doesn't quite set and it will be gummy as you work with it. Not gummy as in gummy bears, but gummy sticky. It's not going to just stay put where you want it. All right. So there is a beautiful, perfect square. So we make a number of these, and then we start to assemble the quilt. We can just move this out of the way. So going back here, this is one of those. So we'll make as many as we like, and then we're going to set them side by side and just zigzag them together on the sewing machine on a really nice narrow zigzag. And that's how it goes together. Now it's up to you how you want to arrange them so you get some kind of interest going. So in here, what was the attempt was to put the darker denim in the middle and then lighten as we go to the edges, and also including with what went on top of the pizza. Okay. So the other question you probably will have is once we have the circle, whatever you used, a saucer, a dessert plate, a bread and butter plate, if you drew it yourself, what size is the square? So don't worry, we don't have to do any high-end geometry. So there's no failure on this. Get yourself a 1/4 inch graph paper, and you're going to draw a line that goes diagonally through all the little squares all the way down. You're going to measure the size. Hold on, I'm not disappearing, just have to go for a ruler. We're going to measure how much the circle measures across. Remember diameter, but don't worry what it's called. We want to measure how much that is. This one is 6 1/4 or 6 1/8. So on that line that you drew, you're going to put a starting point, and then you're going to measure 6 1/8 and put another point there. So far, it's not difficult. And then from those 2 points, you're going to draw a line that's parallel with the grid and a line parallel with the grid the other way, and likewise this way. And you have a square, but that square is just a little bit too large. Once you have that square, you're going to cut it by 1/8 of an inch on 2 adjacent sides less. So my square is this one measured 4 3/8. You cut the fabric at 4 2/8, which is 4 1/4, and you're batting again 1/8 of an inch less than that, and everything will work out. The reason for making the fabric and the batting a little bit less is to allow for the folding of the denim. It will take up some fabric. If you don't do that, you'll have ripples in the fabric. Okay, if you have any questions, just put them in the chat, and I'm sure Supri will have those cataloged and we can discuss them at the end. Okay, now some of you probably have heard about using t-shirts in making memory quilts. Okay, it's a beautiful idea, and yes, it can be done. I'll just give you one little bit of advice though. As soon as we cut this t-shirt, it will want to roll up. It's just the nature of the fabric. Otherwise, it wouldn't be so nice and cozy and everything. So what you need to do is you turn this t-shirt the wrong side out, like so. Give it a nice press so everything is nice and smooth here. And then the entire piece that you're going to need to make the quilt, it needs to be stabilized with a fusible interfacing. More precisely, a fusible woven interfacing. So the type of interfacing that is not going to stretch, because there's a knit interfacing and there's also, you know, that interfacing that feels like paper. You don't want those. This one has no stretch one way, no stretch the other way. We need to put that on the t-shirt. Otherwise, when we're sewing, it will curl and it will stretch and you'll have a nightmare. Okay, so just a little bit of a heads up on that. Now, I love the introduction that Supri did about our native people, because they did have respect and a dignity for everything that they owned and possessed and so on. So there was very little waste. It was when it's beyond any additional use that we can get out of it, that's when it went into the compost. Okay, so other things that you can do, for example, if you have lots of shirts or a lot of sheets that you can't use anymore, lots of just fabric type of stuff that it has outlived its original use. You can cut, say, rectangles, roughly say 25 by 30, stack them one on top of the other, and then you're going to sew diagonal lines. The diagonal lines on this one were done every 3/4 of an inch. And then you cut in between them, but not the last bottom layer. Once they're washed, they will separate and they will bloom. So this becomes a little mat for the back door. Or you can make the stitching a little bit closer. They can become placemats. They can become cushion covers. I've used them even to make jackets. Okay, so just ideas. If you have questions, again, just jot them down. We can come back to them. Oh, John is telling me something. Could we get written steps on the measuring section? Yes. If you jot that note to Supri, I'll get that and I can pass it on. All right. We're going to move now to creating, sorry,
can you explain the mat construction again? I do not understand.
The mat construction, absolutely. So our circle, you remember, or the circle I had, measured 6 3/8. So I need to draw a square that's that size, but it's difficult to draw that. So the easiest way, let me start here. I have 1/4 inch paper, right? And I'm going to draw a diagonal across one square and from there to the next square, So it's a long line, but I want diagonals through adjacent squares. Okay, so let me do that. I know sometimes it's better to cover less but cover it enough so people can use. So let's draw that diagonal. I appreciate your questions because this also gives me an idea of where you're going. So there's my diagonal. I'm just going to put a mark here. And then from that mark, I'm going to measure 6 1/8. So I'll use my ruler. So from there, 6 1/8. Can you see that? Supri, can you wave yes to me if you see it? Yeah? Okay. So again, I'm going to draw a line horizontally and a line vertically. And that is going to determine my base square. So let's do that. You know, you have to remember that our pioneers, when they arrived in Canada, whether in the East or West, and I still to this day don't understand, when they arrived in the East, they wanted to go West, and when they arrived in the West, they wanted to go East. But the big thing is, most of them couldn't even read or write, and yet they could do this. So don't think about the math about logs and trigs and sins and coasts. To me, sin is the thing you shouldn't do. Okay, so there's the square now. But this square is a little bit too big. So I'll want to cut my fabric 1/8 inch less horizontally and 1/8 inch less vertically than this square. And the batting 1/8 inch less than that again. Let's see, John has another question. Explain most.
Matt?
Oh, the mat construction. So it wasn't this, it was the mat construction.
No, there was that too.
Yeah.
They wanted written instructions.
Okay. So there, but I can generate written instructions for that. Okay, going then, is that kind of an okay? Whoever asked that, if it's still not okay, we can get together again.
Written instructions.
Written, that's fine.
Okay, mat construction.
Mat construction, absolutely.
Any fabrics you recommend?
Oh, yes. Well, you know what? This question and answer as we go along might work better. Okay, the mat construction. So this originally would have started probably with a piece of fabric, say 25 by 35. So collect your fabrics that you want to use for the mat, 25 by 35, you want it to be this size, and you just stack them one on top of the other. On the very bottom, it's recommended that you use something a little bit stronger. So maybe you have an old fall coat, you know, made out of gabardine. If you cast your mind back to when we used to wear gabardine, something that's a little bit tougher. Denim is a possibility, but denim wiggles too much. You know, a lot of people think that denim is really sturdy and everything, but it really isn't. That's why when we wear denim clothing, it's so comfy because it stretches, it shapes to our body. It's almost like a bathing suit. Okay, so we stack all those fabrics one on top of the other, and then diagonally, so not on the vertical or the horizontal of the fabric, but diagonally. So this way, we're going to sew lines, say every 3/4 inch, or even every inch. If you want to go less than that, God bless you, because it's going to be a lot of work. So 3/4 inch is a good middle ground. So you're going to sew these lines every 3/4 inch, and you're going to sew through all the layers. If you get a little bit of a ripple in it, don't worry. It will all be fine at the end. Believe me, it will work. So once everything is sewn, you'll take a pair of scissors and you're going to cut in between the sewing lines. So here, the sewing lines are on the yellow. That's why the yellow is not curling up, because it's been stitched down. So there's a stitching line in there, and the fabric in between has been cut. All the layers except the back. As a matter of fact, in this instance, the back was a really tough fabric, but we didn't want the stripes showing through to the front, so we put another layer of yellow there, or pretty fabric, and that's why it comes out to that color. So once they're cut, you're going to bind everything all the way around. So you probably square up your piece, bind it all around, and put it through a really few tough washes in your washing machine and in the dryer. What you can also do to make this bloom even more is put it through the wash, take the toughest scrubbing brush you have, and just scrub the bejeebies out of this. Okay, one way, the other way, around, put it in the dryer, back in the wash, scrub it, back in the dryer, wash, scrub, and so on. The more you wash this, the more it will bloom. And you'll notice, for example, here, the blooming is almost complete. In other areas, it still has to bloom. It's still springtime for it.
Any fabric works.
Any fabric works better than other. Rayon is fantastic for this, rayon fabrics. Cottons work as well. Polyesters not as much, because polyesters tend to have a bit of a memory. So if they want to stay straight, it's very difficult to convince them to curl. Whereas cotton and rayon, cotton doesn't have much memory. You wash it, it softens up, and it becomes huggy and lovey. Rayon loves to fray, and that's what you want to happen here. But do remember, do your stitching on a diagonal, because if you do it on a straight line, you'll just have frayed threads, and they will become strings and rope and so on, and you will not get this result. So the big trick here is the diagonal sewing. Okay. All right. If I do miss anything still.
Just how many layers of rectangles?
Oh, how many layers? I probably would not go less than, say, 5 to cut. So you'll have 6. In this instance, I think we had 8. Okay. Also, the thinner the fabric, the more layers I would use. So in cotton, maybe 5, 6 is fine. As soon as we go to rayon, you might want to go 7, 8, maybe even more. In the instance when we did the a winter jacket, this is very warm. It's almost like having a lamb's wool coat. We used 6 layers, and that really blew beautifully. It was all done in off-white and ecru. And we had people, when we wore it, people would stop us in shopping centers, in the mall, anywhere, and they would just come and pet the coat and say, where did you get it? So it doesn't have to look homemade, it has to look handmade. Okay.
Vera, sorry, quick question.
Yes.
Again, in terms of the mat, there's a question here. It says, should you have a stronger sewing foot/needle?
No, your universal needle is your all-purpose type of needle for any kind of woven fabric. So that should be fine. If you're really worried that the needle is going to object to the amount of penetration it has to do, I would go to a denim or a jeans needle. Okay, because it's sharper. As a matter of fact, a jeans or denim needle, it's the only tempered steel needle of all the needles. So that means when it's going down, it's going to stay straight and it's going to keep on penetrating. The other needles are not tempered steel. So when they hit something, they tend to do a little bit of a, like if you've seen the butterfly swimmers in the Olympics, they kind of go, and as soon as it starts to bend, when the machine pushes that needle, it snaps. So if you're worried, go to a jeans needle. Also, the jeans needle has the sharpest point. So if it needs to get through something, it's definitely going to plow through. Good questions. Good questions. Thank you. All right.
Sorry, one more last question, please.
Sure.
Can we get these at Fabricland or Michael's? I think it was for the first one where you were talking about the beautiful fabric for the squares.
Yes. For the squares, okay, other than from your own collection, okay, I'm not affiliated with any store, okay? I will not speak ill of any store online, but I will speak well of stores. If you would like to get fabrics reasonably, go to an independent. Ultimate
Or for
Sewing in Oshawa has a good collection of quilting cottons, and they're fairly reasonable. Most of them, I think, are around the $12 to $15 range. Okay, obviously, there are some that are above that. There's a quilting store in Stouffville. There's a quilting store in Bowmanville. Well, you'll find the prices are a little bit more friendly to our pocket. Okay, as far as needles as well, you can get them at those stores. Okay, how many ladies have old Singer machines? By old, I mean something that's in the 30+ vintage. If you have a 30+ vintage machine, have a check what kind of needles your machine takes, because it probably will not take the same system of needles as most machines today. So you can possibly do some damage to the machine. Okay, and I really wouldn't want that to happen. And likewise, if you have an old vintage machine that's 2000 system, so they'll be called a needle 2021, 2025, 2028. Don't use those needles in current machines because it will definitely damage the new machine. The needle is longer, so you'll probably drill through the bobbin case and the bobbin, and yeah, your mechanic will be very happy to receive the machine in payment. Okay. I think Supri's screen has gone black. Oh, Supri is there. Good. Okay. Any other questions?
No.
These are all good and excellent questions that are related.
Good for now, Vera.
Okay, fantastic. The next one is our cushion. So this lovely cushion, that was what she was dressed in for summer and part of fall, but we're heading into winter and she needs to change her clothes. One thing that I like doing with cushion covers is invisible zippers. So when people start feeling around, and I also have to generally go looking, where is the closure? It's nice to have an invisible zipper because it disappears. And it's easy to open it, take the cover off, wash it, do whatever. But invisible zippers are something for another day. So we have this cushion and we need to dress it for winter. And I don't know about you, but let me show you some of the sweaters or knit type clothing that I have. This is a lovely piece. Can you maybe up it on me? Okay. If you look at it, a little bit higher, you know, it's a beautiful sweater. It has this big, huge cowl neck, which is so ever elegant. But what happens, have a look at the bottom. The back goes way down, so it covers my tush, and on the front keeps on creeping up and up and up, and pretty soon it starts looking like we have a malfunction in the wardrobe. So that's why this one is being discontinued as a garment piece. Okay, let's go back to the table there. Thank you. So here's the cushion. Let's see if this piece is going to, first of all, fit the cushion. So at one end, yeah, we're doing pretty good coverage right to the edge, but let's look at this end. There isn't enough to go around. And well, it's not a big thing if we include part of the collar, but the problem here is that you notice the this cowl collar. Oh, I'm glad I didn't have wine before I did this seminar. The cowl collar will have pleats in it, and I don't find that attractive. So I'm going to discard this sweater for this particular large cushion. I have something else that's an option. And it's a longer dress when Vera was much thinner. And in addition, the dress is pilling. So it has all these little baubles on it that I really don't like, because somebody like my sister will sit beside me and pick all night at them. Now, one thing that would be pretty here is if we left this ribbing as an extra at the bottom. If you like it, it's fine. If you don't like it, you can hike it up. So we're going to sew up that cushion cover at the edge of the ribbing. For this case, I'm going to leave it hanging over. And now let's see at the other end. Oh, we have plenty of this lovely stuff here. Okay. So I'm going to turn this inside out and we're going to start working on it. Because we need to have right sides together to sew things. And when we turn them right side out, they're going to look all right. Now don't fall into a trap, because this is a nice finished edge. The first thing you'll say, oh, I will sew that together because it's so nice. But that means at the other end, when we have a cut edge, that will have to be the end that you'll have to open and close every time that you change the cushion cover. Now, because this is not a fine heirloom sewing project, I just got a permanent marker and basically going to mark where I'm going to sew. Now, how many of you have sewn stretch fabric on a sewing machine? You probably found that the fabric stretches, it doesn't want to look good, it shimmies, and so on. If you have a serger, definitely the better option. But if you don't have a serger, you can still do it. What I would suggest on here, if you have a sewing machine, is put tissue paper, like, you know, the stuff that you wrap gifts for whatever, Christmas, birthday, whatever. Put a piece of tissue on the underside, a piece of tissue on the top, and then take it to the sewing machine and sew. You'll find that the machine will sew across this without stretching. If you don't, this will keep on growing like this, right? So your cushion cover is going to have horns. This is not for Halloween, it's for Christmas. Okay, so I have a serger ready to go. We can do it that way. Now, the only other thing is, this is a heavy knit. So as soon as we cut this, it will want to run. So if you try, probably some of you are not old enough for this, but remember when we wore pantyhose and you'd get a run and the thing would just go all the way up? It can happen to this. So I don't want to cut it ahead of time. On the serger, I'll just follow that line and serge across. On a sewing machine, well, obviously you're going to sew across, maybe sew 2 lines, about 1/8 of an inch apart, and then cut off beyond the lines. Okay, so let's get my serger here. If you don't have a serger, don't feel that you are left out. Most of us start with just a sewing machine, and then eventually we go, oh my goodness, I've been missing all this stuff all my life. What did I think of? Don't worry, it's all right. I'm just going to pin this so it doesn't go out of place for me. And with a serger or with a sewing machine, we don't put the needles across the sewing path. On a machine, if the needle of the sewing machine hits a pin and the needle breaks, it's probably the best thing that can happen. Because if the needle hits the pin and it doesn't break, it deflects. So it means it's going to hit your bobbin. And it will put a little nick in the bobbin and you start getting work. If it deflects even more than that, you're going to put a little chip in your bobbin case, which is even worse of a problem. All right. Let's go and sew. And I'm going to set the stitch width as wide as possible on this. Yep, let's go and try it. I need to go a little further up and my table is too high. I'm coming down in the world. Power cord is not reaching. You know, this never happens in the studios much. All right, there. Something to do with this. Because the dress is so heavy, it's pulling away from the serger. There we go. All right. Also, sergers have something called a differential, which means if the fabric is stretching out, I can tell it to bring it together a little bit, or if the fabric is gathering, I can tell it to stretch it. And I also have to make sure these pins come out as I'm going.
So Vera, there's a question here.
Yeah.
If you don't mind. If I'm sewing, not serging, should I turn the sweater inside out before I start?
Absolutely, yes. Yes.
Thank you.
In all sewing, we want to construct our seams with right sides together. Because when we flip it over, you want the pretty side out, not the grungy underside, the unpretty. Well, look at that. I have a midriff sweater now, or a shrug. Gee, that would be pretty good just to do as a shoulder warmer. Anyways, for another day. So there's the edge that was serged. We just have these serger tails that we can come at the end, tie them into knots, because sometimes they will want to kind of fray out and you will lose the seam. Now, if you want, you can go a second time with the serger, but I'm looking at the stitches here. They're close enough. I'm not going to have any runs in that seam. So we've kind of made ourselves a bag. Cut that off. There we go. And what did I do with the cushion? Here it is. I'm going to put that on. Now, if this were a cardigan, the whole job is even easier because you have the buttons down the middle of the cardigan to put your cushion into or through. Look at that. Now here for closing, a couple of ideas. You can get some yarn and a heavy needle and just do a hand stitch up and down, and not too small. You want to use it as an accent. So about every ½ inch, or because they're ribs, you can do 2 ribs on top, 2 under, 2 over, 2 under. Another thing that is also very, very pretty is maybe mark out 5 places where you're going to put buttons. And the reason I say 5 is because aesthetically, that somehow our brain finds odd numbers more appealing than even numbers. So don't put 4 buttons, put 5 buttons. Or you can put 3 buttons. If they're big buttons, 3 buttons are enough. The buttons that I have here are this size, so 5 might be good. So mark 1 in the middle, 2 more on either side. So as you're going up and down, go through a button, continue going up and down, the next button, and so on. So it's a neat way of finishing it off that way. And also with it being done with heavy wool that you just woven through up and down, when you need to open this, it'll be fairly easy. You just pull out that yarn and you're ready to undress the cushion. Okay.
Question.
Yes.
I am sewing, not serging. Should I turn the sweater inside out before I start?
Yeah, we did that. We did that. Yes. Yeah, very good. Any other questions on that? Also, probably if you go now to the Sally Ann secondhand stores, places like that, you'll probably find a lot of these kinds of things already there if you don't have your own collection. Okay. If your sweater or garment is smaller, you just need a smaller cushion. But as I said, with that leftover piece, I don't know about you, but I get cold around just the back of my neck and the shoulders. So this leftover piece could very well do that job. Okay, the sleeves will make really nice neck rolls, right? The bolsters. And at the end, you can just tie them off like that. And at the other end, it's sewn up. Another thing that, well, my grandchildren like is somewhere to keep their hands warm. And I like that because it keeps both their hands together so they're not pawing my walls. So you just turn the other end in and just tuck it inside and you have a nice hand warmer, right? It's probably more in for the romantic days when we used to go skating with the hand warmers. Okay. How are we doing on time here?
10 minutes.
10 to go. My goodness. Any other questions? Well, nope. Let's squeeze in hems, denim hems. Or do we want to do the t-shirt aprons? Supri, what do you think?
Sure, whatever you're comfortable with. And also buttons, please. I think that.
Oh,
would be
buttons, yes. Well, let me do a quick one on hems. And more so because there's some tips I can give you. We're often in the position that we need to hem jeans. And we go, oh, not the jeans, because there's that big lumpy, you know, where all the seams come together. So again, if you have a serger and you need to hem, well, if you recognize the shorts, they were part of the piece of denim that I used at the very beginning for making the quilt. So this is what happened to them. The top still fit, but the leg wasn't long enough. But we needed to hem them. Since this was for our daughter, what I did is I folded up where the hem is to be that she wanted, cut back 3/4 of an inch, serge the edge, and that's just going to get stitched. So that's really easy. Over here, the going is not too bad. It's only 2 layers of the seam. So that's great.
T-shirt apron is asked about.
Okay. Now, when we come to do a real hem, that means we're going to fold under and then fold again and stitch. And now I have 3 layers to go through. So I'm not going to show you how to do everything else, just going to give you the tip on how to sew through this big, huge, massive bulk. Okay. If it's too big, hammer it. Okay. My husband's hammer, piece of wood from his workshop. That's where I want it to be. And that's pretty thick. Oh, that's gone right down. And it's gone to about half the thickness. In factories, that's how it's done. Make sure you have a jeans needle though. Okay. And buttons. Buttons. Ooh, also going over the thickness in the jeans. If you go to a reputable sewing store, okay, somewhere where they say, you know, Janome or Pfaff or Husqvarna or whatever, ask them if they have a hump jumper. So when we're sewing, that hem on the pair of jeans will be sewing along, and then all of a sudden the foot comes to a thickness of fabric and it doesn't want to advance. So put your needle down into the fabric, stop, raise the presser foot and put this under the foot. So you see it's thick, super thick and half thick. That will raise the foot enough so it can now slide over onto the thickness. Once you're at the end of the thickness, you bring this to the other side and you sew as far as you can through that crotch, but don't sew beyond, because you know what happens if you sew higher than the crotch, it hurts. Okay, so you'll sew to the end of the crotch, stop with the needle down, pull this out and continue sewing. So the hump jumper. Okay. Buttons. Okay, just sewing buttons. I have a button here. Oh, we'll use one of these. It's not very difficult. You can, well, I prefer to sew buttons by hand rather than by sewing machine, because to do it by sewing machine, you have to have a special foot, and I'm too cheap to get it. So what I've done here is I have a needle, and it's pre-threaded, because if you watch me thread this, you would start crying. So I have about 30 inches of thread that I folded in half, and both ends have gone through the eye of the needle.
Okay. There's a question.
Yeah,
Hammer it in to make it flat, or hammer it in to get the needle in?
hammer to get it flat, to reduce the height of
The fabric.
the fabric through which you'll have to sew.
Hammer
Yeah.
to make it flat. Okay.
Okay, so we got the thread in the needle, so you have at one end the thread loop, and here are the ends. How many of you tried to sew a button, and every time you get just going, the thread just gets all, I wouldn't say the word, but scrooged up, and you just can't undo it? So girls, we all love candles. Get a piece of wax that is not colored, and put your thread on top of the wax, pull it through a couple of times. You're not trying to make the thread smooth, you're trying to stiffen it up a little bit. And it also reduces the static. So let me get a piece of fabric. Oh, this is as good as any. Here we go, get a thimble on hand because I don't like hurting. And so let's say I want to sew the button right there. Most of us want to start sewing from the back and have a big gobby knot. If you're a good sewer, you don't want gobby knots at all. And the thread has a loop in it. So I'm going to put the needle through the point that the button is going to be. So there it is. Come back up and catch the loop. Okay. And that's fastened, and you don't need a gobby knot. And now we're going to sew the button. This one has only 2 holes. There, back. And you're going to do this back and forth and back and around a number of times. Now, sometimes you don't want the button to be nice and tight against the fabric. So you might want to put a toothpick between the in and the out, between the 2 holes in the button, and that will give you enough of a lift that the button is lifted off the fabric. In particular, this will apply when you're doing buttons on coats and such, because you have to leave room for the fabric that's going to come here. Okay, once you've done enough around, the problem now is, what do you do to fasten the end? Okay, so you go just under the button and a knot. Okay, this one doesn't want to cooperate. It doesn't happen in real life, right? There you go. Maybe 3 times. And that's not going anywhere. So you don't have gobby knot to start or gobby knot to end. And I just want to do a little bit more on buttons, because that was a simple button to sew on. But most likely when you're presented with a situation of a button is maybe in a pair of pants, and you're 3 minutes and we're out. Okay, I'll talk really fast. You know where the button is going to go because there's a hole. So you have to rebuild the fabric. Remember when we used the steam seam to stick fabric on? Use steam seam to add fabric on the underside of the pair of pants, and then go ahead and sew the button. And usually, so if there is a button you're going to sew, also add the little clear glass type buttons on the underside, so that the stretch of the top button is not going to be on the fabric, but on the button on the underside. Okay, on that. Ooh, how to prevent buttons from falling off on store-bought items. There's this neat thing called, can you see it? You see it? Fray check. Okay, sometimes it's called fray stop. So you take this and you dab it on the underside of where the button was sewn, on all of them. It's a gummy type fluid or liquid that when it dries, it's totally gone, but it kind of holds all those threads together so they don't start raveling. Okay, so that's fantastic. When our kids went to university, they all got a bottle of that because it said, don't come home for me to sew buttons on. A quick one on the t-shirt to an
Yes,
apron.
please. Yes, please.
Yes, please. All right.
Is everyone okay with that? If anyone is running late, we
Anyone
can
has
send
to
them
go home?
running.
Okay. So you have a child's t-shirt. It could also be an adult t-shirt. It doesn't matter. I just like doing a little one because it doesn't take as much space to show here. Oh, you girls are making me hot. There. All right. What we're going to do here, I lost my pens. Lost my pens. Where are the pens?
So there's one with a
No.
Sharpie over here.
Nope, I got it. Got it. These are called friction pens. I love them because I can mark up fabric with them. And when I touch that line with a hot iron, it disappears. Okay, so it's very visible. And these aprons will incorporate the rib band around the neckline. It will continue to be used. So my apron, I would like it to start right where the seam is going to go right where the band ends. And something like that. And I will draw something very similar on this side. And that's going to be my seam line. Again, we can do it with the sewing machine or we can do it with the serger. Remember to put your tissue paper on top and on the bottom when you're doing it with the sewing machine. And this is done with the good sides inside, bad side out. So I've done that on this little thing and turned it out. And the reason this became an apron, because this used to be my Canada shirt, but the seams were turned around from the side, they went to the middle, and this side went to the back, so that's why it's an apron. So there it is. And then you cut off along the edge the back of the neckline. So you get this kind of situation, and that comes up. Right? I pinned that all in place, and now I'm going to stitch it in here. And underneath, I have that soluble stabilizer. Once I've stitched in here, I can cut all this away. So you have regained the entire neckline. We all okay? And then for here, for the ties, I'm going to use the cuffs from the t-shirt. This is not a time to cut yourself. Has happened. Okay. And you see the apron is now double thickness because I find a single thickness t-shirt apron is very floppy and no self-respecting child will want to wear it. And if you're doing it for adult, they're going to go, yeah, no, thank you. Okay, so we want to put these on as ties, but we want to do it a little bit more gracefully. So I'm going to cut a little bit of this here. Turn it inside out. So there's my serge seam. Put this through the little hole. You see it? And give that a quick buzz. And I can buzz all the way down if I like, or maybe not. Well, it's just as easy to buzz all the way down. If you can also do this by sewing machine, so let's it's attached. Okay, and we'll go for the other sleeve and do exactly the same. Okay, ladies, any questions while I'm cutting this? If I can have my readers or interpreters.
Nothing so far. Everyone's following your tips.
I hear something.
One of the requests is to, if you could please repeat the neckline part.
Sure. So you got this. I don't need to do this one, I don't think. For the neckline, let's go to this one. So the shirt is turned inside out, right? And the trick is to start your seam right where the neck ribbing is attached to the shirt. So you need to start sewing here and then to wherever you want. Okay, on this side and then on this side. Once that is sewn, then you will cut away the back part of the neckline, and that will be free floating. Right? Turn this then the t-shirt right side out, and you get this. Let me turn it this way. Right? So you make sure this is all nice and smooth. Yes, that will wrinkle a little bit, but doesn't matter. It's still all flat. So once it's like that, then we'll come and sew with the sewing machine there. Let me just get the sewing machine and sew that in place, because it will give you a better visual. At this point, you're probably saying, are you kidding me? That's not going to work. This is what I do at night when I can't sleep. Sometimes my husband says, did you sleep last night? No. What, were you upset? No. Well, what's wrong? No. Brain would shut down.
Vera, another question is the sleeve essentially being cut to make it a longer strip?
The cuff of the sleeve is cut off from the sleeve, and that then becomes the apron tie. Yes. Also, if you use the entire t-shirt, those little ties will be enough to get around. If we cut off, and if you look some of the YouTubes, they cut off the t-shirt about here. And I find, first of all, I don't know about you, but when I'm cooking, I kind of wipe my hands where I shouldn't. Kids do the same thing, right? So wrap that in an apron, and hopefully it will deter them and me from that bad habit. Okay, now I have white thread on the machine purposely so you can see where I'm stitching, and I have just a regular foot on the machine. There is a foot that's called edge joining foot. So it's like your regular foot, but right in the middle, so the foot is like this, and right in the middle, there is like a metal partition. If you guide that metal partition, hold on. If you guide the metal, that partition right in there in the ditch where the two fabrics come together, your needle will fall exactly where it should. So it's called an edge joining foot. Again, if you can't get it or you're having troubles, leave a message with Supri. I can get back to you. I just need to know the model and the make of your machine. Okay. This is like riding a horse standing up. Man, this beats doing yoga. Hold this position. 10, 9, 8. And don't rush when you're sewing on a machine. Remember, this is a lot faster than doing it by hand. Oh my goodness, where did you go there? So having that piece of, whether it's stabilizer or tissue on the underside, fantastic. Okay, I'm not going to worry too much about that precision. I just want to show you. One more pin there. And we're going to cut off the unwanted part. John, where are the scissors? John is just sitting here very patiently enjoying this. John does woodwork. I do the same thing when he's doing woodwork, except I have tons of ideas on how not to do things. And we're going to trim this unwanted stuff out. And this is not the time to cut through that ribbing. It will make a grown woman cry. Okay, here we go. Almost there. But it's amazing how many things we can restyle, redesign, you know, come up with any definition you'd like to use up and give something another full life, which otherwise would have gone into our landfills. I was just saying to Supri before everybody else arrived that we have 3 composters in the backyard. And there's a wheelbarrow full of compost. I don't have anywhere to put it now. All right.
You gave them some woodworking.
What's that? What's a comment?
We maybe have woodworking session next year.
Woodworking, yeah, by John. So there you go.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yep. Well, and that still has the full stretch. Well, let's see if it works on Vera's head. Yep. Okay, John. I need
Camera.
up the camera, please.
There we go.
We'll pin it to the shirt because it's missing one tie. So there we go. Oh, it makes it all the way around. That's okay. All right. Well, we skipped over some things, but I think it was a good session all in all. Yay.
This is beautiful. Oh my God. It looks like you just bought a new apron and you're wearing it. It's amazing.
It fits quite well, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I think the beauty of it is to keep the entire ribbing. As I said, there are quite a few things on YouTube. I said, I won't speak ill of those that are not present to say it to their face. Personally, I prefer to keep the entire ribbing intact, and I like to make it double thick. Yeah, if you saw this single thick, no, it just doesn't. It doesn't graduate to being handmade. Okay, so, well, I hope everybody's enjoyed this. It's been a pleasure to be able to be with people, first of all. And hopefully this is just seeing the light of COVID hopefully coming to a little less intense time in our lives.